Welcome to DZR's The Armory. We are going to be taking an in-depth look into the division, the gear, the guns, the strategies that you need to take back New York. Hoagie is out today, so I'm your guest host today. I'm Origami Train. With me today are a couple guests. You know Captain Underdog. How are you doing, Captain?
I'm doing good. How about you?
Doing great. Also with us today, we have a special guest, Scribbles, who has been doing some research with us in the DZR&D team. And welcome, Scribbles. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. It's good to be here.
Today we're going to talk about Sentry's Call. It's the set that we all love and we all love to hate. We'll get started a little bit with just some of the basics and get you through them, but one of the focuses we want to maintain here this episode is that while there is a meta regarding the Sentry, and while a lot of people follow Sentry in one way, there are definitely multiple ways you can run this build, and this has been consistent with some of the other focuses that we've made on other sets and will make in the future. But certainly on Sentry, this is an important point that we want to make. So with that, we're going to start off and talk about the basics really quickly. Cap, why don't you tell us what the set piece bonuses are?
All right, for your two-piece bonus, since the 1.3 drop, two-piece is now 10% headshot damage. For your three-piece, it's the 10% damage to elites. Your four-piece still procs the Stalker's Mark. That's the talent. Targets dealt a headshot will take 15% additional damage, stacking up to 3 times. Now, that's part of it is the 15% is not linear. So it's 15%, and then the next one is 32% additional, and the next one is 52% additional. So it really makes a big difference. It's also good to know it lasts for 10 seconds, and if a headshot is dealt to that same target before it's downed, before that 10 seconds is up, it will refresh the 3 marks. Now with the 1.3, they also, since they changed the set a little bit, the 5-piece is now where your additional headshot damage, which is an additional 20%, and then your 10% damage to elites. So that would give you 30% headshot damage for the 5-piece and 20% damage to elites with the 3-piece. The 5-piece.
All right. Some of us have seen a fair amount of this. Others have had a hard time finding it. Where's the best place to find some Sentry gear?
I would say, Falcon Lost, of course, that's where the main gear sets are from the original 1.1 drop.
Mm-hmm.
You can also get them from the 4 Horsemen. I mean, it's a random gear set drop whenever it does drop. Underground, since you can now get them from sealed caches. You can get them from the Dark Zone, though I haven't seen very many Sentries in the Dark Zone, and also from your supply drops.
Excellent. Yeah, I've seen them in the Dark Zone actually more than I've seen them in Falcon Lost myself, but that's RNGesus for you, right?
That's right. That's right.
So we wanted to talk a little bit about the sets that complement this set, and Sentry is an interesting one because there's the 4-piece bonus that you can run, or there's the 5-piece bonus, and so it's a little unique in that regard, because with the 5-piece bonus you're not going to get a secondary gear set that you can run for a 2-piece bonus. So we're all running Sentry at various points. We're all running them a little bit differently, but let's go over that. The 4-piece versus the 5-piece. Is it worth it? Cap, what do you think?
Personally, I like the 5-piece for that additional headshot and damage to elites. That to me works really well. Now I can understand where you would use the 4-piece, but it's not like it was when you use the 4-piece and then the 2-piece striker for that additional damage. It's just, to me, it's a trade-off. It just depends on what you want to do with it.
And if you're running 5-piece, what are you running with it?
I would personally run the Savage gloves. I prefer that because depending on which weapon I'm running, I usually my Savage gloves have SMG damage, assault rifle damage, and marksman rifle damage. So that's pretty much what I use.
Cool. Scribs, how about you? I know you're running a couple different versions of the Sentry build for yourself. How's your set put together in terms of complementary sets or pieces?
Well, I've tried a few different things out. One being a 4-piece Sentry, 2-piece Striker for that extra enemy armor damage. If you're looking for extra damage output, I mean, honestly, you're going to be better off with, like Cap said, the Savage gloves, the Reckless chest, or doing a 5-piece Sentry over some of the other sets' bonuses. I guess, as far as just raw damage. My personal favorite, though, right now is a 4-piece Sentry, 2-piece Final Measure. I feel like that gives you a pretty well-rounded build to be able to go into the Dark Zone and deal with the griefers throwing sticky bombs at you and the elites hitting you with the fire damage. And your damage output is still phenomenal with a 4-piece. It's really good.
Yeah, I tend to run a 4-piece myself. I
Yeah.
have the 5-piece and have run with it sometimes, but I tend to lean towards the Tactician's Authority as a secondary myself to get that extra skill power boost, especially if you have a moderate build where that 4,000 makes a significant difference. Obviously, if your skill power is, say, 11k base, then that extra 4,000 is not doing a major benefit to you. But if you're at 27, then the difference between 27 and 30, 31 does make it does make a difference. It has a benefit there. So that's another one that I've found as well. So let's talk about the roles a little bit. We mentioned before that there are different ways to roll this, but at its core, we know that Sentry is a damage dealer. It's a DPS king. Scribs, how are you rolling your Sentry? Particularly your damage dealer first, and then maybe you can talk about your more balanced build after that.
For my damage dealing one, I've got a 5-piece Sentry, 1-piece Lone Star being the holster because it's got awesome rolls on it. As far as the chest goes, I think armor is going to be one of the major attributes just so that you can reach that armor cap. Outside of that, I'm always a fan of EDR. Even if you're doing straight damage, you can't do damage when you're dead. As far as a mask goes, the damage to elites is a good choice, as well as skill power. Both of those, elite damage, that's raw damage. Skill power is going to help out your skills some, using a pulse or a smart cover, something like that, or even a booster shot. That's going to increase your damage output as well. As far as a knee roll goes, I haven't found that I'm underneath the armor cap. I've pretty much stuck to the critical hit damage. But obviously, if you aren't at the armor cap, then you might have to sacrifice that roll for armor. As far as the backpack goes, I'm a fan of the skill power, again, but you can roll the critical hit damage on for that extra damage. That's pretty big. Gloves, it kind of plays to what weapon you prefer, I guess. You can roll AR damage, SMG damage, shotgun damage, marksman rifle damage, any of those, which are all solid. I think the key is having that crit hit damage and the crit hit chance as the two main stats there. Those are huge. And then the third stat roll, as far as which weapon you want extra damage towards, is pretty much up to your call. Yep, exactly.
Of course.
And then for the holster, armor, there's nothing else that even comes close to the benefit
and
of having
it's interesting
armor on
as
the
you
holster.
sort of describe this. We talked in our previous episode about the Deadeye build, and despite this being a much heavier damage dealer in terms of raw damage versus that Deadeye, the build is a good roll is very similar between the two, and yeah, there's some flexibility, but like you said, armor on the chest and holster, critical hit damage on the knee pads if you can get it, and on the pack as well, because damage is the goal for this one. So
Yeah, but
Exactly.
that too can play into your play style, and what you're trying overall to build out of that gear set to best complement your play style and maybe your group's play style.
Sure. So let's talk about playstyle, because as we said, there are a couple different ways you can work with this set. Cap, how are you using this set?
Mine's kind of a balanced build. I've been trying to ease up a little bit on the DPS, but I've got I think 38k skill power with this, so it's fair. I was having trouble getting my stats up, and looked at it the other day, realized I'm running 2 pieces of 240, so they're still viable, but all my stats are a little bit lower. So I typically, to be honest, my pistol does as much damage as any of my main weapons, so I tend to mark with the pistol and continue to use it for the most part, unless I need to break down some enemy armor. Then I'll swap to that assault rifle. But I mean, I just mark the targets as much as I can and try to keep them marked, because I'm not running the high DPS that I should. I have to depend on the marks before I can really make a difference.
Sure. Scribs, you're doing more of the damage in your build. How are you finding it in terms of your playstyle and what approach you're taking?
Well, I think having the higher damage output is really solid for if you're doing incursions or PvE style game content. Obviously, with my build especially, I'm super glassy. I mean, if I get hit with even a gas grenade, I go down, unless we've got smart cover up or an immunizer. But I think the cost benefit there is okay, because I can knock down a heavy elite with very few rounds because it's doing so much damage. And I think, obviously you're marking, you're helping everybody else out with that damage boost as well. I just think that you're putting out a lot of good for the group, even if you're glassy, Now in the Dark Zone, probably not so much. That's kind of where you want to probably lean more towards a little bit tankier, balanced build.
Yeah, I'm sort of somewhere in the middle between both of you. I don't have a very good roll on my Sentry piece, I did initially when I first started playing with Sentry. My crit hit headshots were around 1.2 million. Once I got those marks up and was sitting on the smart cover, and I was pretty pleased with that. Nowadays, I'm hitting for about 75% of that. My skill power is a little higher. At the time, my skill power was like 18,000, so I had to rely on my squad mates for the smart cover, for the booster shot, for any of those other bonuses. I find for me that it's a good marker and not such a good damage dealer, strictly from my playstyle, because I am someone who, once I've shouldered a weapon, I want to continue using that weapon, whereas I think the folks who are really doing serious damage are, as you guys have said, switching off to the assault rifle for some additional hits, or if you're using a marksman rifle, making sure it's one that's got some good talents on it. You can do that damage. I'm one who uses the shotgun a lot more, but I don't use it very much in PvP. I use it for PvE, particularly when the NPCs duck behind cover, and you have that little sliver of their head showing above the cover. That the shotgun comes in really handy for that. What I've also found is, because of my extensive use of some of the other sets, my headshots are a little more potato-y than they used to be, and so that's certainly something to keep in mind on this in terms of the style of play that you adopt, I would say. So let's talk weapons. Obviously, you have to have a semi-automatic weapon to proc those marks. So we're talking marksman rifles, we're talking shotguns, we're talking pistols. What are you guys running with, Scribs?
I'm using a M1A sniper rifle. It's got deadly, it's got brutal, and that seems to be just a really heavy hitter. I ran with the SVD for quite a while, and it's nice because you don't get quite as much reticle bloom, quite as much recoil. And I'm still a believer that the SVD is good. Some might not think that,
I like
but
mine.
I've seen it in action, and it does well. The First Wave X45, it's just the best pistol, period. And especially for marking. I mean, there's been times where I'll sit down behind cover, put 3 marks on, and I'll just finish out the clip because it's hitting for 350, 400,000 damage each shot. Shotgun, the M870 is pretty king right now. It does a ridiculous amount of damage, and it's pretty steady. The SASG is also a good choice, I think. I feel like it's got a little bit faster rate of fire. And then, I typically will run the G36, or I've even been toying around with a few other ARs recently, just to swap between. Once you've marked them, pull up that AR, burn them the rest of the way down, and it's very effective. I like it a lot.
Like I say, I mark with that pistol, that First Wave X45. Mine has cool headed on it. I like it. Same with my M1A. It has cool headed. It has deadly and I think capable or possibly. I mean, it stays on target pretty well, so I use it. But also use that G36. And I've been experimenting with that M870 and the SASG, but I'm having trouble with that M870 getting that one is none to proc for me. So the reload speed's so slow, so I tend to go with the SASG. Either that or I got potato aim and can't hit the headshot.
Yeah, that's been my experience with the 870 as well. The damage is nice, but I haven't found good rolls on one yet. So I run a tactical SASG, and I'm hitting for about 205K on my DPS base, up as high as 250 depending on some of my swap outs for it. I agree with both of you. The M1A is king. What I have found is the SRS, the M44, some of those bolt action sniper rifles, they just don't have the rate of fire that you need to keep up, which is a little disappointing to me, just because I like the way they feel, but certainly on a Sentry mark, they're a little bit too slow for getting those procs. So yeah, M1A is definitely the way to go. And you're right on that pistol, that X45. If you get a First Wave X45, that is a nice quick mark. It's almost SMG speed. I really like running that, particularly with a ballistic shield, just to roll around the DZ and mark targets that way, and then just clean them up with the pistol. It's pretty fun.
And the damage is still really nice with it too. I mean, it's up there, right there with a primary weapon.
Yeah, I agree. So we talked a little bit about talents as we were describing those. Are there any other talents we should be looking at? We know Brutal for the headshot bonus. That's an obvious choice for a Sentry, since headshot is where you get your benefits. We talked Deadly. We talked Capable a little bit. Any others that you guys like?
I'm a big fan of Destructive. Armor damage is always cool. I also like Cool Headed, kind of like what Captain said, because my Sentry build has quite a bit of skill power baked into it as well. So I'm not just out there strictly to shoot. Like, I'm trying to provide some sort of skill support as well. So with that Cool Headed on, I actually had a sniper rifle the other day that I was testing that out with, and I mean, you talk about your skills coming back quick. It's pretty key, because you're shooting headshots. You're killing two birds with one stone. You're getting your skills back quick, and you're putting marks and damage
what are you running
there.
on the other talent side? Not just weapon talents, but the talents that you have assigned to your agent.
I enjoy Triage. I think that's huge in the current state of the game. The way that it is so cohesive with a squad, you know what I mean? With the heals and the skills, it just comes back, makes your skills come back so quick. Two that I've been toying with that I don't see a lot of people run. The first one being One is None, where you have the 50% chance on a headshot, I believe, to replenish that bullet as if it never left the magazine. That's been pretty huge, especially running a sniper rifle and a shotgun. Even with the AR or an SMG, you'll find that it procs way more often than you would think. So your magazine size seems like it just bumped up by another quarter or half. That's pretty cool. The second one being Steady Hands, where when you enter cover, you've got 10 seconds, I believe, of 25% less recoil, especially with that G36 that got ninja nerfed with the stability. That makes a huge difference. Even with your sniper rifle, I've found that putting shots down range is way more on point. It helps with some people's issue of the potato aim. You can hop off cover, hop right back on. It replenishes the buff. You can keep it up the whole time if you're aware of it.
Well, so we've talked about this set, and a lot of the things that we've said are true as a solo player, but certainly this is a squad-based tactical shooter slash RPG. So we really want to talk about how we're supporting the rest of our team. The marks are obvious. What are you finding with a team makeup that's going well with this? What other sets do you think this is a good helper for, and vice versa? What other sets are you finding run well with a Sentry as we start to talk about squad makeup?
I would say, of course, Reclaimer. Reclaimer's a good fit in any team. Depending on the skill power between the Reclaimer and the Sentry, a lot of times Reclaimer's got a high skill power to keep that the consumables up all the time. If it's high enough to keep a max smart cover, then you probably don't need a tactician there because they can fill in as well. But if you have a decent skill power, you can run the pulse. You can run a smart cover if you're the strongest one and don't have either one of those. You can run the flashbang, sticky bomb, overheal, or booster shot. I found that booster shot works really well. I know you can also change out a chest piece for the vigorous chest piece, and that way you'll get the overheal that's associated with it without having to have the actual overheal on, and you still get the damage buff and damage resistance buff. But as far as what runs well with it, I'd say, your striker. I haven't seen many people run a striker lately. Your Lone Stars, any DPS, as long as you've got the skills covered. But that Reclaimer really helps.
Yeah, I like running my Deadeye with it. When we've run as a group, I sometimes have to put on something else just for the extra skill power bonus. But when we have a good balanced team and I can throw Deadeye on it, those marks make a huge difference for my damage that I'm putting out, and I really enjoy that. Scribs, what are your thoughts?
I agree totally with Cap. I think that the Reclaimer is huge, and I've been noticing this thing where the Reclaimers are building a lot of skill power in, and it's kind of negating the tactician side of things, which is interesting. But basically, everybody's going to benefit from being with the Sentry. Your high skill power guys, the tacticians, the Reclaimers, their damage is automatically going up by 52% just having a Sentry guy there. So he's no longer shooting frozen peas downrange. Now he's actually being able to help in more than just one way. He's actually putting out decent DPS. So I think they benefit in many ways, both directions.
I would agree. So one of the things we like to talk about in our episodes is what the limitations are of these sets. A lot of people think that the Sentry is the meta. It certainly has been treated that way in the DZ, in the PvP environment for sure. But no set is perfect, and let's talk about that. What are the limitations of the set? Cap, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do. If you have high DPS, then the Stalker's Mark, it doesn't really benefit that much, because if you can take him down with 2 shotgun shots, then what's the point of having the marks? But I mean, that's just for an overpowered DPS build. If you're weak and running skill power, then that may be the way that you get your damage up, which is unfortunately what I'm doing. But the marks only last for 10 seconds, so if you're slinging peas, you're not going to do anything much in those 10 seconds. So you have to mark again and then swap back to your primary damage dealer. I think that it depends on how you use your build and what you do with your makeup, and it also depends on the stats that you have on your gear, because that makes a big difference.
Yeah, I would agree, and certainly let's include the obvious limitation of this set, which is that if you're terrible at headshots, you're not going to get the benefit at all. So if you have a true potato aim, you may want to look into a different set to support your squad. Much fun as marking the NPCs and even other players is, if you can't hit the headshots, you're not getting the bonus of it. So that's a big one. The other question, and probably the final question, is, does this set work as it was intended? And now with that, there's the caveat that this set was certainly nerfed at one point. but there was an initial intent, we think, from Massive, and certainly the player base has taken off with it. Does it work? Is this a good set? And why is that a good set? Scripps, why don't we start with you?
I think it's an awesome set. Personally, it's my highest damage dealing set, period. I've tried Predator, I've tried Striker. They have their own special points to them, but as far as numbers go and just straight damage, nothing touches it. And I think that may or may not have been close to what they intended on doing when they developed that set. Probably not as overpowered as it currently is. It gets the bad rap of being overpowered because so many other sets fall short of that mark. I think it complements other sets well. It's awesome for a squad-based setting when you're using the right skills.
Cap, any other thoughts?
I think it's working as intended because I have low DPS and I need my team to help take them down for me.
Mm-hmm.
So, that being said, yeah, I think it's working great. I think that the way they've made Shotgun Sentry as the meta for PvP is correct. That is the current meta because Sentry pieces are pretty easy to come by, and if you run underground, if you run PvP, any in the dark zone, I mean you're getting some decent shotguns, and being able to roll one of the talents over, you can pretty much get a pretty decent one. Just got to keep looking for it. But yeah, I mean, can it be determined as overpowered? I'm kind of thinking the same way as Scripps is. I think he's right that maybe the other ones just don't live up to as powerful as this one is, as far as just true DPS.
Yeah, I would agree, although I think that as we move forward through this podcast and certainly as more information comes out in the future as things maybe change, but even without changes, we're going to be talking some about how you can deal with someone running a sentry and how you can counter that. And so for me, that's where I would say it is working as intended, because it is not completely unstoppable. As we've noted, you have to be running a glass cannon build to get the true DPS out of it, and that leaves you open to some other issues. And if you run tankier, you're not going to do quite as much damage. And certainly, people running a Tanktician can stand up to a sentry to a certain amount. So, because of those kinds of things, I would agree with both of you that it is working well, and I think. I think it will continue to be one of the most popular sets for a while. Well, that's all the time we have. I'd like to thank Scribs and Captain Underdog for joining us. Thank you, Scribs. It was a good run with you.
Yes, thank you for having me.
And Captain, as usual, another fantastic episode.
That's right. Looking forward to seeing y'all in the dark zone.
Indeed. That's it for us, and we will catch you again next week with yet another episode of The Armory.